Hello, my name is Debbie Metke. Today is September 24th, 2017, and I have the honor of interviewing Roger Kotila today, and he is the president of the Democratic World Federalist Association. So thanks for joining us today, Roger.
Thank you.
Now, how did you become a World Federalist?
I was doing radio in San Francisco. A listener sent me a copy of the Constitution for the Federation of Earth, done by the World Constitution and Parliament Association. It sat on my desk for 6 months. I didn't look at it. And then I started looking at it. And I had been involved in various activist activities, starting with the protests for the Vietnam War, and then moving over to the anti-nuclear movement and the protests at Diablo and Rancho Seco. And I'm a psychologist. I dropped out of private practice, quit my private practice, and lived and worked with the homeless for a couple of years because that was an era when so many people were ending up homeless during the Reagan administration. But the long and short of this was it seemed like we'd solve one problem here, stop a war here, there'd be a new one start there. Poverty grows. Now we've got climate change. And it's kind of frustrating. It seemed like we'd move from one thing to another, but never really get a solution about it. And then when I read this Constitution, I really wasn't that familiar with world federalism, or the idea that world government could intervene and actually stop war. So the light bulb went on. I said, wait a minute, there might be a way to deal with a number of these problems all at once. Let's take poverty, worldwide poverty, not just the United States. We have to end war to solve that, because right now the money's going to bombs, to tanks and so on and so forth, missiles. And so you can't really house many homeless people in an F-35 jet that they're preparing to carry nuclear bombs to go destroy the world. In fact, the nuclear modernization program currently underway by the U.S. government, they call it the Life Extension Program, a modernization of the nuclear weapons. I call it the Life Extinction Program. Mm-hmm. So that's how I was introduced to world federalism. Now, the passion for me was I had a one and only religious experience. And I'll call it a God experience. But basically I was told that we have a 50-50 chance, and the nuclear weapons, the nuclear thing was the issue. That it wasn't a done deal, that we could make it. And so, to some degree, spiritually, I was put on assignment, so to speak. When I returned from that, I was in Hawaii at the time, and when I returned here to California from that vacation, I ignored the instructions I had gotten to start solving this problem of the danger of the nuclear weapons. I got increasingly depressed. And I couldn't understand why, because I had a wonderful lifestyle as a successful psychologist, had a lot of good friends, etc., and so on, good social life. The minute I started becoming an activist, a serious activist, the depression lifted. Ever since, I can hardly go a day or two ignoring these problems. I started getting depressed. So psychologically and emotionally, I'm really kind of tied into to trying to get the world to see that we need a world federal union. As a psychologist, I know that we cannot get rid of the nuclear weapons. We can't get rid of war unless we have a world federal union government. Psychologically, it just can't be done. If we keep continuing in the present geopolitical system, where each nation does its own thing, called sovereignty, where there is no real law and order, where leaders of nations can commit world crimes and never go to jail for anything, the problems we have with these wars and so on will not stop. So in world federalism, you have to have a situation where you introduce some real law and order. Right now, the global level, there's no sheriff in town. So these leaders of bully nations do anything they want. The UN, the United Nations, is helpless, can't put them in jail, can't arrest them. So we have these world criminals running governments.
The UN doesn't have an army?
No, it doesn't have an army, and it doesn't really have a decent and adequate judiciary system.
Does it have much teeth at all?
No. The International Criminal Court's a brilliant idea because it brings in the issue of individual accountability. But the problem is that it's only applied to poor nations, like in Africa. The big boys, it doesn't affect them. In fact, nations can say, we don't want to play. We don't want to participate in the International Criminal Court.
Why did they set up the United Nations like that, Roger?
Well, the basic big five, although it comes down really to the United States and Russia when the charter was signed, I think really wanted to keep the power, so they developed a system, a geopolitical system, which where the veto gives them complete control pretty much of what happens in all respects. And that veto has been the problem with the UN Charter from the beginning. And that's one of the things that has to change.
Right.
We have to get rid of the right to this veto.
So how are we, little people, ever going to, stand up against these big countries that wanted to keep the power for themselves and keep the United Nations weak?
In my mind, it's going to be a two-pronged approach. We need a popular movement of just regular people around the world. It has to be a worldwide movement that decides they really are tired of these wars and they really don't like the idea of the threat of a nuclear holocaust, bottom line. Now, this same grassroots type of movement has to decide that they're tired of worldwide poverty. Poverty is absolutely unnecessary. Bucky Fuller taught us that we have enough resources in the world. We have the technological know-how to take care of everybody. So you have to ask, well, why aren't we taking care of everybody? Well, the answer is obvious, because of the militarization. And then, of course, the thievery of the international banking system. The 1%ers have all these, they're taking in all the money, the profit centers, and while the 99% are doing the suffering. That has to change. That will not change under the United Nations. They do not have control, nor can they regulate the multinational corporations.
So there's no world sheriff to even monitor that, right?
No,
okay.
And that has to change.
Right.
So that's why with Democratic World Federalists, for my part, I emphasize the need for a democratically elected world parliament. One with, well, as you know, I'm a spokesperson for the Constitution for the Federation of Earth. This is a world constitution drafted by over 1,000 world citizens over about 30 years. And what it does is give us a model of what a world federation should look, a good government. That's important, a good government. Not this situation now where we have all this corruption. And so what I advocate and add is what I call a new UN, meaning we replace the United Nations Charter, which is defective, and I could go into a number of reasons why it doesn't work. They can't stop the wars. They can't stop the covert operations of bully governments overthrowing socialist governments or other governments they don't like. And the Earth Constitution can solve these problems. So the idea is to get the United Nations General Assembly to agree to review the UN Charter. That's already in the Charter. They're supposed to review it, and they've ignored it. They haven't done it, but it's legally required. Once we get the General Assembly to open up the Charter and start talking, and I want them to compare the United Nations Charter to the Earth Constitution and to look at the benefits. Which one can end war? Which one can end poverty? Which one can guarantee our human rights? And so that's the strategy. It'll require a popular movement the people have to want it. If they don't want it, if they don't want a new world constitution, they don't have to have it.
Well, we better act fast from the way the world is looking right now.
And we're going to have to get some nations, I hope that there are some nations that are willing to defy the bully nations and join forces with us. Right now, the way it works, there are a lot of nations that would like to get rid of the nuclear weapons, but the bully nations refuse. Mm-hmm. And when the United Nations speaks up, the United States, for example, says, okay, well, we won't fund you. We won't give you money. If you don't do what we want, we won't give you money. Mm-hmm. So there's kind of a blackmail going on at the UN. Mm-hmm. And we have to reach out to members of the United Nations to get them to start openly talking about what's really going on, which is basically manipulation and blackmail.
Uh-huh. Wow. Do you have much hope for the way things are going, or that people rise up? I
think in a way it's mission impossible. It's going to be we have about a 50-50 chance.
Well, that's not impossible then. That's 50%.
The Pentagon could screw up at any time, and there could be an accidental discharge of nuclear weapons. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a race against time and a lot of luck. But when I say mission impossible, I don't mean that it can't be done. I just mean that it's a big task, because mm-hmm. the big boys have the money, they have the media, they have the military, and they have the police. Mm-hmm. So we have to reach out to the people to say, okay, well, enough of this.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm at.
Well, what a challenge. It kind of makes me inspired to do all I can to see how far our energies can take us to rouse up a mass populace.
What I tell people is, it's kind of like I have a family, and I have grandkids and so on. If your house is burning, you have a moral duty to try to put out the fire. And that's kind of the way I see the global situation, that those of us that are in a position have to do what we can to see if we can save it.
Oh, beautiful. That's great. And do you have any words of advice for those who will follow us?
Well, give money. all of these peace activist groups and the human rights groups and the environmental groups, they always need money. But the other thing is find your area of passion and work in that area with some organization that's working. Like my passion is I hate the nuclear weapons. And so I stick with the Democratic World Federalist, because that's one of the things we want to do, is eliminate them. Now, other people, they hate poverty. It eats at them to see all this unnecessary poverty in the world. So they need to work in an area where people are actually working on the problem of poverty and mm-hmm. hunger and food and all of that. Mm-hmm. Others, the climate change issue, mm-hmm. which is becoming bigger and bigger. Mm-hmm. Now, with climate change, the advantage of having a world parliament is that instead of these nations saying, oh, maybe I'll cut back on pollution, maybe I won't. A world parliament could pass laws so that the nations all have to cooperate and do what's right. And that's why a world parliament would be very important.
Mm-hmm. So if people want to find out about your organization, how will they do that?
Well, I belong to two organizations, the Democratic World Federalists. I'm the president here in San Francisco. Just give us a call or email and get together over a cup of coffee.
Uh-huh. And just Google Democratic
we
World Federation.
I like to meet people and see what their interests are, and then give them ideas about where they can fit in.
Okay.
The other organization is the Earth Federation, guided by the World Constitution and Parliament Association. And they also have a nonprofit, like DWF is nonprofit. You give money, it's tax deductible. The Earth Federation has the Institute on World Problems, which is their nonprofit vehicle. So those are the two organizations I work closely with. So.
Okay, well, wonderful. Well, everybody get off your seats and let's get involved and change the world. And Mr. Kotila, Roger, thank you so much for interviewing with us today. It's been an honor.
You're welcome. Thank you.